There are days at Baker Street that exist, as it were, outside the calendar, hours too calm to belong to any particular date. That afternoon was one of them. The fire made its patient crackle, the city murmured faintly beyond the window, and Sherlock Holmes, his long frame folded in the armchair opposite mine, appeared content to let the world turn without his interference. He had spent the morning polishing the stem of his pipe with unnecessary precision, while I, immersed in the latest medical journal, allowed the ordinary peace to settle around us like fine dust. It was in such moments that I best knew my friend, silent, abstracted, yet entirely alive beneath the stillness. "You are wondering," he said without opening his eyes, "why the human mind experiences greater satisfaction in stillness than in noise." I smiled. "You read philosophy now." "On the contrary, I read you. You have turned the same page of your journal 4 times in 5 minutes. That implies either distraction or tranquility. I wager the latter. The city's racket has become a kind of silence to you." Before I could reply, the clock on the mantel gave a discreet click, not the expected chime, but a sound like a pin pulled from glass. A second followed, higher, sharper, tick, 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 each stroke ascending in tone rather than falling. Holmes's eyes opened. "That," he murmured, "is new." The sound repeated, climbing the air as though a drip of water were moving upward through the walls. I turned toward the source. Nothing moved save the faint shimmer of heat above the fire. Holmes rose and crossed to the window. "No wind," he observed, tapping the pane. "No condensation. Yet something insists upon rising." The final tick merged into a small, papery flutter, the fall of a telegram through the letter slit. Mrs. Hudson's footsteps sounded in the passage a moment later, but Holmes was already stooping to retrieve the message. "Ah," he said, examining the red-sealed envelope. "So the sound preceded its arrival, a herald with its own overture." He broke the seal, the paper crackling softly in the hush. "From Inspector Gregson. Urgent. Case at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. Phenomenon involving blood observed to rise against gravity. Request your immediate presence." Holmes folded the note with meticulous care, as if preserving a specimen. "Watson," he said, "when nature reverses herself, either man has deceived her, or another man has deceived us." His tone carried that curious mixture of amusement and gravity I had come to recognize as the overture to adventure. "You think it's some laboratory mishap?" I asked. "Possibly, or possibly not. A single phrase, 'blood rising,' may conceal 100 truths. We shall not find the correct one from our armchairs." He took his hat from the peg, every motion economical, inevitable. "Fetch your coat, my dear fellow. We are summoned to witness the rebellion of a fluid." Within minutes, we were descending the familiar steps to Baker Street. The fog had begun its evening descent, coiling about the lamps like pale smoke. Our cab clattered eastward through the half-lit city, wheels striking sparks from the stones. Holmes spoke little during the drive. Once, as we crossed Holborn Viaduct, he tapped the side of the cab with a gloved finger, echoing that same ascending rhythm. Tick, 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 as though testing the city for sympathy. "Strange, is it not?" he said finally, "that sound should climb as easily as fear." At St. Bartholomew's the gas lamps burned low. A constable recognized Holmes at once and ushered us through echoing corridors that smelled of antiseptic and coal smoke. "Inspector Gregson awaits in the surgical theater," said the man. "He's shaken, sir. Says he saw blood climb a wall like ivy." Holmes's brows lifted slightly. "Then we must examine both the wall and the inspector's eyes." We entered the theater. White tile, iron table, the sharp gleam of instruments, an ordinary room rendered uncanny by silence. Upon the far wall, under the highest vent, ran a thin scarlet line. It did not fall, but curved upward, tapering as it rose. Holmes approached without haste, lens in hand. Note the texture, Watson. Smooth. Recent, yet untouched by gravity's hand. How extraordinary. I bent closer. It appears to have moved, yes, but perhaps it was thrown. Thrown blood ascends in arcs, not lines, he replied quietly. And yet here we find a patient line. Obedient, deliberate, climbing. He touched the lowest edge with the point of his pencil. Still tacky. The phenomenon continues. Gregson, pale and sweating, stepped forward. Mr. Holmes, it started half an hour ago. Nobody near it. The witness swears it climbed before his eyes. Holmes turned. The witness? Professor Marbury, sir. Lecturer in physiology. He's waiting in his laboratory. Excellent. A man of science should appreciate the irony of seeing nature misbehave. He glanced once more at the streak on the wall. We shall follow its ascent, Watson, until reason catches it by the heel. The faint tick, tick, tick echoed again from somewhere above, the same rising sound that had begun our afternoon. Holmes's eyes narrowed. The noise climbs with it. Keep your ear to that rhythm, my dear Watson. It may yet tell us who commands the blood to rise. Holmes advanced a step nearer the vent, his gaze fixed upon that thin scarlet filament climbing the wall as if it drew breath. A pattern of pulses, he murmured, not unlike the rhythm of a heart deprived of its body. Gregson made a choking sound. You don't mean it's alive, Mr. Holmes? Alive, Inspector? Hardly. But it responds to a force yet undefined. Let us discover whose hand or intellect summoned it. The tick, tick, tick recurred, faint but insistent, from within the iron vent above. Holmes tilted his head to catch the rhythm, his fingers marking its pace in the air. Notice, Watson, the interval between beats narrows. The sound is not organic. It accelerates mechanically. We are listening to an instrument, not a phenomenon of blood alone. I caught the same impression. A clockwork pulse somewhere behind the tile work. An experiment, then, I asked. Some electrical contrivance? Precisely the question we must put to Professor Marbury. He turned on his heel and strode toward the adjoining laboratory. I followed, the inspector close behind. The passage was lined with cabinets of glass instruments, all glinting faintly in the lamplight. Through a half-open door came the faint hiss of gas and the scent of heated metal. Within, a man sat hunched over a bench littered with copper coils and delicate tubes. His hair was silver, though his face, gaunt and pale, belonged to a man not yet 50. He did not rise as we entered. "Professor Marbury?" said Holmes gently. The man looked up. "Yes, I presume you are Mr. Holmes." "The same. You were witness to the event in the theatre?" "I was its cause, perhaps," Marbury replied in a low voice, "though heaven knows I intended no such display." Holmes's eyes sharpened. "Then describe to us, if you will, what precisely occurred." Marbury gestured toward a brass cylinder on the bench. I was demonstrating a new form of electrostatic pump, an attempt to draw air upward without mechanical blades. A minor novelty, nothing more. As I adjusted the charge, I felt a pricking at my wrist. A drop of blood appeared, rose from the skin, and adhered to the wall. Before I could move, the entire line formed itself upward. It seemed drawn by the current. Holmes examined the cylinder without touching it. A curious mechanism. You claim the blood responded to electric induction? Either that or something in the field between this device and the vent. I was connected to the circuit when it happened. The body became, as it were, a wire. Gregson crossed himself. "And you call that science, sir?" Marbury smiled wanly. "I call it misfortune. I have destroyed stranger things than blood." Holmes bent to the apparatus. "Watson, observe the residue along the rim. You see the brownish trace? That is not dust. It is coagulum. The blood was genuine and fresh when expelled." "But not thrown," I said. "It followed a line of energy." "Exactly. Yet note, No sign of burning or charring where the current would exit. The human skin could not have conducted so cleanly. Therefore, the origin of that blood was not the professor's body. Marbury looked up sharply. Not mine, but I felt it rise from me. Perception is rarely a reliable accomplice, Holmes answered. Might another source exist, an animal used in demonstration, a sample preserved nearby? The professor's eyes flickered toward a small refrigerator cabinet. Holmes noticed the glance. He opened the door with calm precision. Within lay several vials, neatly labeled, each containing dark fluid. Specimens, said Marbury quickly, for teaching, human and animal both. I keep them under mild electric preservation. Indeed, murmured Holmes. And when did you last inspect them? This morning. They were perfectly inert. Holmes lifted one vial. The blood within shimmered faintly, as if stirred by unseen breath. He held it up to the lamp. A delicate thread ascended the glass before settling once more. You see, Watson, even sealed, it responds to field influence. Not supernatural, but sensitive. I felt a shiver. Then the climbing wall was no ghostly act, merely a byproduct of this device. Holmes set the vial down carefully. Perhaps. Yet every cause leaves a signature. If electricity moved it, there must be current. If magnetism, there must be iron. And if deceit, there must be motive. Gregson exhaled. Deceit? You suspect the professor? Suspect? No. Observe. He's trembling, but from fatigue, not guilt. His eyes follow the apparatus with affection, not fear. A man who kills by accident trembles differently. There is sorrow here, Inspector, but not yet crime. Marbury's voice broke slightly. You think someone meant this as mockery of my work? Holmes straightened. I think someone found in your experiment a veil behind which to conceal their own. He turned toward the corridor. Watson, recall the sound that heralded the telegram, the same upward tick we hear now from the vent. Its origin must be traced. Gregson, post a man below the building's foundation. The pipes or conduits there may hide more than air. The inspector nodded and left, glad to escape the charged atmosphere. Marbury sank into his chair, rubbing his temples. Mr. Holmes, I assure you there was no malice here, only curiosity. Curiosity, Holmes said softly, is the first step toward revelation and occasionally toward murder. Tell me, who else had access to this laboratory today? Only my assistant, Henry Vale, a gifted student but impetuous. He left at noon. Without notice? Yes, he seemed disquieted. In what manner? He said the air felt wrong, that it hummed. He refused to touch the apparatus again. Holmes's gaze sharpened. Then he perceived what others ignored. An excellent beginning. The sound in the vent deepened suddenly, like a sigh of metal. A red droplet appeared on the rim of the brass cylinder, swelled and rolled upward into the air before bursting. Marbury cried out. I stepped back. Holmes alone remained motionless, watching the last faint stain vanish upon the metal. Remarkable, he breathed. Blood does not rise. Therefore the room does. I stared. What do you mean? He pointed toward the gas flame above the bench. The flame curved upward, yet its tip leaned sideways, toward the vent, as though the very air were ascending. An atmospheric draft reversed, he said. Something draws the air upward through that vent, creating suction strong enough to lift light fluid. But the source, that remains hidden. He moved toward the grate, eyes gleaming. Professor, fetch me a ladder. The truth, like this blood, lies above us. The ticking in the vent resumed, quicker now, echoing through the duct like a racing pulse. Holmes looked up into the darkness, every line of his face alive with curiosity. Whatever force beats there, Watson, he said quietly. It beats like a heart that refuses to die. The sound rose once more, metallic and close. Tick, 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 then stopped. The silence that followed felt heavier than gravity itself. Holmes's hand was already upon the vent grill before the echo of that last tick had died. "Quickly now," he said. "Watson, steady the lamp. Professor, the ladder, if you please." Marbury obeyed, wheeling a narrow iron ladder from the corner. Its base struck the tile with a hollow note that merged eerily with the faint tremor still whispering through the ductwork. Holmes ascended, each rung creaking softly under his weight. I held the lamp high, its flame fluttering in the upward draft. The air smelled faintly of ozone and iron, sharp and dry as the breath of a storm. "Note the suction," Holmes called down. "It is no mere accident of air pressure. Something above is drawing, mechanically, not naturally." He tapped the metal edge of the vent. A hollow vibration answered, descending through the ladder like the murmur of distant machinery. "Holmes," I said uneasily, "if this vent connects to a furnace, then we shall discover its appetite." He worked the grill loose with his knife and peered into the shaft. For several seconds he remained silent. Then he turned his head slightly, voice low but distinct. "Watson, the duct is newly lined. Fresh metal cut by hand. Our hospital architects did not order this." "Someone modified it?" "Precisely. And note the residue at the edge. Copper filings and soot. A device of some complexity lies above." He descended, eyes bright with the thrill of pattern. "Gentlemen, we shall need access to the attic or roof space above this wing." Marbury hesitated. "It's rarely used. Storage for obsolete apparatus. The key is in my desk." Holmes accepted it, his smile brief and unreadable. "Then let us visit the ghosts of past experiments." We followed a narrow stairwell whose stone steps echoed the recurring tick, tick, tick with uncanny precision. The rhythm seemed to travel before us, guiding our pace. At the top, a low door yielded to the key with reluctant squeal. The air beyond was colder, laced with dust. Old operating tables lay overturned against the walls. Coils of wire hung like cobwebs from beams. Yet amid the gloom, one patch of floor gleamed, recently cleaned. Holmes crossed to it and knelt. "Here is where the vent rises. Observe, Watson. The panel is removable." He pried up a section of the planking. Beneath, a cylindrical tube climbed from the chamber below, its mouth encircled by copper coils linked to a compact motor. A faint electric hum accompanied the stillness. Marbury stared. "That is not mine. I've never seen it before." Holmes glanced at him. "Then someone has conducted research in your name." He traced the wiring to a small wooden box, half buried in shadow. Inside rested a series of glass files, connected by thin capillary tubes. One still contained a dark residue that caught the lamplight with an oily sheen. Holmes touched it lightly with a paper strip. "Blood again. Human origin, I should say. The viscosity suggests it has been exposed to alternating current. See the fine frothing?" I felt my stomach turn. "Good heavens, Holmes, this apparatus was used to draw it upward through the vent?" He nodded. "By creating an ascending electrical field, an invisible staircase for fluid magnetized by iron content. Ingenious, though grotesque." Marbury stepped back, pale. "Then someone has built this horror to mimic my work, to discredit me." "Or to cloak something worse," Holmes replied. "Consider the implication, Watson. A device designed to make blood rise might equally conceal the act of making it fall." "You mean murder? Or preparation for one? The upward motion may be the afterthought of violence." He examined the motor. "Recently used, still warm. The culprit cannot be far." Gregson rejoined us just then, breathless from the stare. "We found something below, Mr. Holmes. A trap door behind the furnace flue. Leads into the same venting shaft. There's blood there, too." Holmes's head lifted sharply. "Then the circuit runs full circle. Excellent. Remain here with the professor. Watson and I will descend by the inner route. Keep the lamp burning. Its reflection through the vent may aid us." We retraced our path. The tick, tick, tick now joined by a faint metallic drip from somewhere below. The sound seemed alive, shifting in tempo as though marking our descent. The trap door opened into a narrow cavity behind the furnace. I followed Holmes into the heat and darkness, the air heavy with soot. "There," he said softly, pointing to the base of the vent. "A small pool, yet no trail leading to it. Blood deposited from above, not spilled here." He drew a gloved finger along the inner surface. "Warm still. Therefore, recent." I bent beside him. "And you think this mechanism above forced it down, then drew it back?" "Possibly. Or perhaps the rising illusion was created to disguise where the true fall occurred." He turned his lens upon the wall. "See the fine scratches? Something cylindrical was inserted and withdrawn repeatedly, the instrument of delivery." He rose, brushing soot from his sleeve. "Watson, do you recall the assistant?" "Henry Vale, a student versed in mechanical design, disquieted by the hum in the air. He vanished conveniently at noon, precisely when this device could have been adjusted unnoticed." "You suspect him, then?" "I observe his opportunity. Motive we shall uncover soon enough." He replaced the grill, sealing the furnace mouth. "Let us return to the laboratory. I would hear Professor Marbury's description of his assistant in detail." As we climbed back toward the light, a faint clang echoed above. Metal striking metal, followed by that unmistakable tick. Tick, tick now muffled, as if something moved within the vent itself. Holmes stopped midway on the stair, listening. "Not machinery now," he whispered. "Footsteps, someone crawling through the duct." I froze. "The assistant?" "Most likely, and he is between us and the roof." He motioned me back, then turned sharply toward the side corridor that branched beneath the theater. "There's an inspection hatch leading upward. We shall intercept him from below." We hurried along the passage, our own steps echoing the same tempo as the metallic beat overhead. The air grew cooler. Holmes produced his revolver, rarely used, but never idly carried. "Watson," he said, "the moment you hear the tick above your head cease, raise the lamp." We reached the hatch. A fine dust sifted down. The ticking stopped. Holmes raised his voice, calm but cutting. "Mr. Vale, you have nowhere to go. The air shaft ends at this very point. I advise you to descend before gravity reasserts itself." For an instant there was silence. Then a rasp, a scuffle, and the grate above trembled. "Holmes, he's—" Before I could finish, a sudden rush of red dust cascaded down, glimmering in the lamplight like powdered rust. It settled across Holmes's hand, staining the skin faintly crimson. He looked up with that fierce gleam I knew too well. "Not dust, Watson. Coagulated spray. The device has been triggered again." And somewhere above, faint but unmistakable, the tick, tick, tick began anew, faster, desperate, like a heartbeat fleeing pursuit. The beat of that tick, tick, tick was now accompanied by a muffled gasp, then a scrape of metal on a brick. Holmes moved before I could breathe a warning, his voice a quiet command. "Lamp higher, Watson. Keep the light steady on the grate." The vent above shuddered once, twice. A smear of red appeared between the slats, then a pale hand thrust through, thin, trembling, streaked with blood and soot. "By heaven," I whispered, "he's trapped." Holmes's tone was level, or cornered. "Hold still." He reached up, unfastened the bolts with a deft twist, and the entire grille swung downward. A figure slid out feet first, landing hard upon the tiles. He lay sprawled for a heartbeat before struggling to rise. A young man of perhaps 25, gaunt, wild-eyed, his shirt torn and chest streaked, crimson where the blood from above had spattered. "Henry Vale," said Holmes evenly. The man froze, recognition flaring in his gaze. How did you know?" "The way you breathed in the duct," Holmes replied. "Panic leaves a rhythm, much like that infernal ticking. You have been inside a machine too long, my boy." Vale sank to his knees, coughing. I only wanted to prove the field worked. By what method? Holmes demanded. By coating yourself in another man's blood? No, his voice cracked. It wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone's. It was a sample, Marbury's own preserved specimens. The machine drew them through the current just as he designed. But when I tried to stop it, something went wrong. The suction grew violent. It pulled me toward the shaft. Then why flee? I asked. Why crawl through the vent like a criminal? Vale pressed his stained hands to his face. Because the inspector was coming, and the blood, it didn't stop. It kept rising. I thought it would never end. Holmes crouched beside him, studying the man's trembling fingers. Fear alone seldom drives a man into ducts, Mr. Vale. What else occurred? Vale hesitated. There was a body. Gregson, who had rejoined us, breathless, swore softly. A what? I didn't kill him, the young man burst out. He was already dead, hidden above the vent. I found him when I climbed up to stop the current. His throat... He broke off, choking. Holmes's face did not change. Describe the position. Hanging over the tube, the blood was dripping from him. When the machine started again, it lifted it, drew it upward. That's what you saw in the theater. For a long moment, the only sound was that quiet tick, tick, tick echoing faintly from the shaft. Holmes rose slowly. Watson, the lantern. Inspector, secure the corridor. Mr. Vale, remain seated and breathe as quietly as your conscience allows. He ascended the ladder we had left by the vent's mouth. I followed, heart pounding. The smell of iron grew stronger as we climbed, mingling with the dry hum of electricity. The upper hatch opened into the attic once more. The lamplight trembled across beams and shadows, until it struck a motionless form, half hanging across the copper coils. A man's body, head tilted back, throat cut cleanly from ear to ear. The blood had crusted into dark rivulets along the mechanism, rising halfway up the wall before drying in that unnatural climb. His eyes were open, glassy, staring at the ceiling with the calm of final disbelief. Holmes's expression tightened but remained composed. Observe, Watson. The cut is surgical, deliberate, our professor's instruments, no doubt. Then you think... I think, he interrupted, that Professor Marbury's experiment provided a very efficient theater for murder. He bent close, examining the hands of the corpse. Ink stains. No calluses. Not a laborer. A man of letters or science. Perhaps a rival. He reached into the man's pocket and withdrew a small notebook. The first page bore a single phrase written in hurried pencil. Field reversal. Successful. HV absent. M watching. Holmes tapped at the initials. HV, Henry Vale, and M for Marbury, clearly. Then Marbury killed him? I asked. Holmes's eyes were distant, calculating. It would appear so. Yet I distrust appearances that obey the alphabet too easily. Consider, if Marbury were guilty, would he remain below inviting our inspection? No, the hand that wrote these letters meant them to be read as proof. A signature forged not with pen, but with suggestion. He closed the notebook. This man's identity will tell us more. Note the faint tan line on his wrist. A watch recently removed. Not a hospital man. Their sleeves hide such marks. And the scent, camphor and oil of cloves, preservatives used in specimen storage. A supplier, then. Someone who furnished the blood for their experiments. I stared at the still face. Then the murder was meant to silence him. Or to give him voice posthumously. Recall the telegram, Watson. Blood rising against gravity. Whoever sent that wished us to witness the impossible, to lend truth to the illusion. We descended again. Vale sat against the wall, head in hands. Marbury had joined him, his face grey with shock as Gregson relayed our discovery. Dead? Marbury whispered. Good Lord, who was he? Holmes turned to him sharply. You employed a supplier for your preserved blood. Who? A Mr. Latham from the university stores. But he hasn't been here for weeks. Until today. Holmes said softly. He came not to deliver, but to confront. You quarreled with him over the specimens. Perhaps over your assistant's unauthorized experiments. When next you saw him, he was in your attic. Marbury's shoulders sagged. I never knew he was there. My God, what have they done? They? Holmes repeated. The professor covered his face. Vale and Latham worked together without my leave. I forbade the use of human samples. Vale persisted. I thought he had merely disobeyed me. Not killed a man. Vale sprang up, voice ragged. I didn't. He was alive when I left him, angry, shouting, I swear it. Holmes studied both men in silence, eyes flicking between them like the pendulum of a clock. Then someone used your guilt and his fear to compose a spectacle, one that would bring me running. Ask yourselves, gentlemen, who benefits from your ruin? The room trembled faintly. A hiss rose from the vent, followed by that steady, mechanical pulse. Holmes turned toward it, alert. Someone has reactivated the motor, he said. The mechanism runs without human touch. The copper coils above glowed dull red. A thin mist began to drift downward, metallic, shimmering like blood vaporized into air. Holmes's voice cut through, the growing hum. Watson, open that window. Gregson, disconnect the power. The inspector lunged toward the switchboard, but before he could reach it, a violent spark leapt from the coil, cracking like a pistol shot. The tick, tick, tick dissolved into a single rising whine, shrill and relentless. The light from the lamp guttered, bending upward toward the ceiling as though drawn by invisible wind. Holmes shielded his eyes. Everyone down. The reversal has begun. The floor vibrated beneath our feet. Instruments clattered from the tables. The air itself seemed to twist, pulled toward the vent in a furious spiral. Holmes shouted over the noise, his words lost in the growing roar. The flame bent higher, the light thinned, and through it all, the rhythm persisted. Now not ticking, but beating, steady, human, terrible. The roar deepened until it seemed the very lungs of the building were drawing breath. My lamp wavered, its flame stretched thin as wire. Holmes pressed his sleeve to his mouth, shouting through the thickening haze. Back, Watson, the vent. Don't let it draw you in. The pressure tugged at our coats. Papers spun upward in frantic spirals. Gregson managed to wrench the switchboard levered down. Sparks showered the floor. The noise broke in half, and then, as if a mighty fist unclenched, silence rushed back. Only one sound remained. Tick, 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 slower now, echoing faintly from the vent above, like a heart that had exhausted itself. Holmes straightened, eyes glinting through the drifting smoke. No deaths tonight, Inspector. The device has merely reversed its purpose. It breathes in no longer. It exhales. I coughed, steadying the lamp. Good Lord, Holmes. If that's exhalation, I hope never to meet its inhaling again. Yet you may, he said quietly. The current was not random. Someone reignited it by remote connection. The signal came from elsewhere in the building. Marbury staggered to a chair, white with shock. There is no remote. The apparatus works only from here. Holmes gave a short nod. That is what its inventor believed. Mr. Vale, however, appears to have made additions. The young man lifted his head wearily. I rigged a secondary circuit through the corridor wiring, so I could observe reactions from my quarters, but it shouldn't activate without the relay key. Then where is that key? Holmes asked. Vale's eyes widened. In my pocket. Holmes extended his hand. Show me. Vale reached trembling fingers into his waistcoat, then froze. The pocket was empty. Holmes's voice dropped to a whisper. Taken while you crawled through the vent, perhaps? Inspector, that key is our murderer's hand upon the throat of this entire edifice. Gregson scowled. You mean the killer's still inside? Undoubtedly, said Holmes. He waited for our attention to fix upon Vale, then resumed the current to destroy evidence. Or men. A faint creak interrupted him. We all turned. The door to the corridor had moved, inch by inch, though no wind stirred it. Holmes crossed the room in 2 strides, flinging it open. The passage beyond was empty but for the rhythmic tick, tick, tick echoing along the tiles. He bent swiftly, pressed his ear to the skirting. Not footsteps. The current pulses again, stronger this time, traveling along the copper veins under the floor. "Holmes, what does it mean?" I asked. "That the experiment has outlived its creator. We are no longer witnesses to a crime, Watson. We are inside its continuation." He turned to Vale. "When you built the remote circuit, what was its power source?" "A galvanic cell in the storage room near the northern wing. But it's sealed. No one could access it without my code." "Which you perhaps explained to a friend." Vale hesitated. Only to Professor Marbury. He asked about it last week." Marbury leapt to his feet. "Yes, but purely out of curiosity. I never went near it." Holmes's gaze lingered on the professor's trembling hands. "Curiosity has become the refrain of this evening, has it not? Very well, let us satisfy it. Watson, bring the lamp. We go to the northern wing." The corridor stretched long and dim, lined with glass doors reflecting our movements like phantoms. Each reflection seemed to shudder to the rhythm of that infernal ticking, which now vibrated through the very metal of the floor. We reached a small door marked "Storage." Authorized staff only. Vale fumbled with the lock. The instant it yielded, a gush of cold air swept out, smelling of iron and ozone. Holmes entered first. The lamp's glow revealed a narrow chamber filled with instruments, batteries, coils, and a table upon which rested a glass sphere thrumming faintly with inner light. Inside the sphere drifted a reddish vapor, swirling upward in slow, deliberate spirals. "Your cell, Mr. Vale?" Holmes asked. The young man nodded weakly. "It shouldn't look like that. It's overcharged." Holmes moved closer. "Or altered. Observe the additional wire looping beneath. Someone has grafted a second conduit to the main feed. That wire leads, yes, through the ceiling toward the vent system." Gregson rubbed his jaw. "So whoever did this made a direct line between the cell and the blood device." Holmes smiled faintly. "Precisely, Inspector. We have discovered the heart of the beast, and now let us see whose pulse it follows." He lifted the glass sphere carefully. The vapor within responded, forming small eddies that turned counter to his motion. "Notice that, Watson. The current resists direction. This is no mere chemical reaction. It is a field engineered to rise. Our murderer has turned science into theater, blood into spectacle." Marbury whispered. "To what end?" Holmes set the sphere down, eyes narrowing. "To implicate you, Professor. To make it appear your work defied nature until it devoured itself. Public disgrace, academic ruin, and, if fate permitted, death by accident." Vale gave a cry. "Then Latham's death was demonstration," Holmes finished. "A single corpse lifted as proof that your discovery worked. He was killed before the field began, his body arranged to make the illusion convincing." Gregson whistled softly. "But who'd go to such lengths just to ruin the professor?" Holmes's reply was quiet. "A rival seeking notoriety, or vengeance. There is one clue that may tell us which." He tapped the glass sphere. "The vapor's hue. It derives from potassium permanganate, favored not by physicists, but by chemists. Professor Marbury, who in this hospital's chemistry department resented your appointment." Marbury's lips parted. "Dr. Elspeth Ward. She lost her post when my funding was approved. But surely, Holmes cut in, she would never kill. We shall see. For the moment, she holds the relay key and control of this field." Even as he spoke, the tick, tick, tick quickened again, hammering through the pipes. The red mist inside the sphere coiled upward, forming a thin column that trembled, then split into 2 twisting threads. Holmes's voice hardened. She is listening through the current. Every pulse carries vibration enough to convey sound. Clever, dangerous. Can she hear us? I whispered. He nodded once, then let her. He raised his voice, precise and cold. Dr. Ward, you have shown brilliance, but genius without conscience is mere infection. You cannot hide within your mechanism forever. For an instant, the ticking faltered, as if someone, miles of wire away, had caught their breath. Then it resumed, faster, urgent. Holmes turned to Gregson. Seal every exit above this floor. She will attempt to flee when the current drops, and Watson, keep your ears open. When the ticking stops, the game begins. The lamp flickered, its flame leaning once more toward the ceiling. The air hummed like a violin string drawn too tight. Holmes smiled grimly. The next sound we hear, he said, will not be a tick, but a step. And as if on cue from the corridor outside came a single, deliberate footfall. Holmes's head turned sharply toward the corridor. That step was measured, Watson. Neither flight nor stealth. She wants us to follow. Gregson drew his revolver. Then let's oblige her. Not yet, said Holmes. If she expects pursuit, she has prepared its route. We will not run into a theater of her own lighting. He moved to the threshold, listening. The silence that followed was so taut that I fancied I could hear the faint hiss of the electric field above us. Then, faintly, came the tick, tick, tick again. Now below the floor, traveling away from us like a pulse receding down a vein. Holmes's eyes gleamed. Remarkable. She is using the conduit not only as current but as signal. Each metallic tick a step in her path. The vent network has become her corridor. Marbury clutched the edge of the table. But where could she go? Those shafts end in the surgical wing. Exactly, Holmes replied. The theater where the phenomenon began. She intends to close her circle. He turned briskly to Gregson. 2 men to each exit of that wing. Quietly, no alarm. The moment the ticking ceases, she will emerge. Gregson hurried off with his men. Holmes crouched by the floor vent and tapped it twice with his knuckle. The sound came back delayed, distant, almost mocking. She hears us, he murmured, and she is faster than I estimated. He rose. Watson, bring the lamp. We shall follow. Not above, but beneath. The service corridor under the theater will lead us to her unseen. We descended a narrow stair choked with dust, the flame trembling in its glass. Every few yards, the metal pipes along the ceiling gave off that familiar pulse. Tick, 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 guiding us like a sinister metronome. Holmes stopped once, placing his hand on the wall. Feel that vibration? She has increased the current. She means to trigger a discharge large enough to destroy all evidence, including herself, perhaps. I stared. Then she intends suicide, or immortality by spectacle. Some minds cannot distinguish between the two. We emerged into a low passage directly beneath the operating theater. Above our heads, the boards thudded faintly as boots moved. Gregson's men taking position. Holmes motioned me to silence and set the lamp upon the ground. A thin fissure in the ceiling allowed a single drop of crimson moisture to fall, bursting upon the tile like a heartbeat. Holmes caught it on a scrap of paper. Still warm, the apparatus has been reawakened. From above came a faint metallic voice, distorted, electric. You misunderstand me, Mr. Holmes. Holmes looked up sharply. Dr. Ward, you risk your life for a demonstration no jury will attend. I risk nothing, came the reply. You chase illusions built on your own arrogance. The machine answers only to truth. Truth, madam, Holmes said dryly, is not improved by voltage. A brittle laugh echoed down the duct. You think me a murderer, yet the blood rose by its own will. It sought equilibrium, as all things do. Holmes's tone sharpened. It sought nothing. You used that poor man's body as a conductor to falsify the very laws you claim to study. The voice wavered, then hardened. You cannot stop it now. The current is free. It will climb until the world believes. Holmes pressed his ear to the vent. She's directly above us, Watson. Perhaps upon the catwalk near the ceiling. The control lever is there. He turned, eyes intent. We go up. Swiftly. We retraced the stair to the theater level. The moment the door opened, a wave of red light met us. The room glowed as if filled with liquid fire. Coils, on the walls, pulsed in time with a tick, 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 now so loud it shook the instruments upon their hooks. Dr. Elspeth Ward stood upon the upper gallery, her dark coat whipping in the artificial wind. In one hand she held the relay key, in the other a wire that trailed into the vent's open mouth. Her face was radiant, eyes fixed on the rising column of crimson vapor twisting toward the roof. "Behold," she cried, her voice ringing across the chamber, "the force that lifts even blood beyond corruption." Holmes advanced, calm amid the storm. "And behold," he said evenly, "the folly that confuses wonder with worship. One more turn of that key, and you will lift yourself beyond breath." She laughed again, wild and exultant. "I have already done so. The field obeys me now. See how it rises." Indeed, the column had grown, a scarlet mist climbing the vent in perfect rhythm with the sound. Tick, 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 each beat a heartbeat, each pulse a defiance of gravity. Holmes's gaze darted across the floor. "Watson, the fuse box, there, by the lower wall. Cut the feed wire when I signal." I hurried to obey, my hands slick with sweat. Holmes began to climb the iron stair toward the gallery, his voice cutting through the roar. "Dr. Ward, listen to me. You have achieved nothing less than inversion of polarity, but your apparatus is unstable. The reversal will collapse in seconds." Her hand trembled on the relay. "You lie to stop me." "I seldom lie," Holmes answered. "But I do count. Listen. 1, 2, 3. At his third word, the tick faltered. A brief silence fell. He shouted, "Now, Watson!" I wrenched the main wire free. A flash of blue fire burst from the conduit. The crimson column shuddered, its ascent slowing, then began to fall, raining fine red dust across the room. Ward screamed and dropped the key. It clattered down the stairwell. Holmes reached the gallery in time to catch her wrist as she staggered. "For pity's sake, woman, the experiment is over." Her voice broke into a sob. "It was never an experiment. It was proof. They mocked me, called me hysterical. I would show them blood could obey thought." Holmes's expression softened for a fleeting instant. "Then it has obeyed madness instead. Come down. Let us preserve what reason remains." She stared at him, trembling. "If I descend, the current will die, and with it, me." "The current," he said quietly, "exists only because you believe it does. Step away, and you will find gravity merciful again." For a moment she hesitated, then released the railing. He guided her down the stair. The red haze thinned with each breath until only a faint tick, tick, tick remained, fading like a spent pulse. Gregson's men entered as we reached the floor. The inspector holstered his revolver with a sigh. "Is it done, Mr. Holmes?" Holmes glanced toward the vent, where the last trace of vapor curled and vanished. "For the moment, yes. The machine sleeps, but truth, like blood, has a way of rising again." As if in answer, the vent gave one final, hollow tick. Holmes looked up, eyes narrowing. "Not yet asleep, then," he murmured. Holmes had not moved. His gaze was fixed upon the vent, where that faint, hollow tick persisted, each note slow and deliberate, like the last breath of a dying clock. Gregson wiped soot from his brow. "It's only the cooling metal, sir. Machines settle like that." Holmes shook his head. "No, Inspector. That rhythm is too constant. Cooling metal expands erratically. This is a pulse. Something continues to operate, perhaps hidden deeper within the conduit. Dr. Ward, now subdued and trembling under the constable's guard, raised her head. "You can't stop it," she whispered. "The reaction sustains itself." Holmes turned to her. "You claim perpetual motion? Then you are either a visionary or a very poor mathematician." "It feeds on inversion," she murmured. "The field turns inward. Even without power, it remembers." Holmes's eyes flashed. "Remembers?" That word again. Thought-obeying current. Emotion feeding circuit. He stepped toward her. "Tell me, Doctor, whose thought sustains it now?" Her voice cracked. "Mine and his." She pointed to Vale, who sat slumped against the wall, head in his hands. Vale looked up, startled. "I don't know what she means." "She means," Holmes said quietly, "that when two minds share the same belief, the illusion doubles its strength. You built the mechanism, she worshipped it. Together you gave it life enough to imitate the laws of nature." Gregson frowned. "Then what's to be done? Pull it apart?" "Pulling it apart would be premature," Holmes replied. "We must learn how far the illusion extends." He stooped beside the vent, listening again. "Watson, mark the interval. Exactly 2 seconds between ticks. But note the secondary vibration under it, half beat. Hear it?" I listened. Beneath the metallic rhythm ran a fainter throb, more organic, like the faint pumping of liquid through veins. "Yes, it's there." Holmes nodded. "A residual hydraulic current. The blood itself continues to move. Gentlemen, we are standing beside an artery of deception that refuses to clot." Ward laughed faintly through her tears. "Then perhaps you'll admit defeat, Mr. Holmes." "I admit fascination," he replied, "but not defeat. You see, Doctor, I have been defeated only by facts that remain unexamined. This one I intend to dissect." He called to Gregson. "Bring the lantern close. We shall open the lower segment." "Is that safe?" I asked. Holmes smiled. "Safety is a hypothesis, Watson, rarely proven until too late." With the inspector's help, he loosened the screws along the vent's lower edge. The panel gave with a hiss. A rush of warm air burst out, carrying a coppery tang that made my eyes sting. Inside, a narrow glass tube pulsed with viscous red fluid that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Gregson recoiled. "Lord help us! It's alive!" Holmes leaned in, eyes alight. "Not alive, Inspector. Pressurized. Someone placed a self-oscillating pump within. Look, an electrical membrane creating contraction and release. Ingenious. Even deprived of current, the tension in the coil continues to flex." He tapped the glass. The tick responded with a sharper note. "Yes, there's our phantom pulse." He straightened. "This is not self-perpetuation, merely delayed exhaustion. It will cease within the hour." Dr. Ward's shoulders sagged. "Then it dies, as we all do, of stillness." Holmes regarded her coolly. "You speak of death as if it were accomplishment. Your machine was never alive, only theatrical. You wished to raise blood against gravity because gravity reminded you of law. Immutable, indifferent law. You thought to defy it." Her eyes filled with tears. "And perhaps I did. For one instant, the world obeyed me." "For one instant," he said, "you mistook obedience for understanding." Gregson cleared his throat. "Then we'll remove this contraption and store it as evidence." Holmes raised a hand. "Not yet. Let it end on its own terms. We may still learn something." He turned to Vale. "Tell me, Mr. Vale, when you constructed this device, did you follow Dr. Ward's schematics or your own?" "Mine," Vale answered miserably. "She wanted something decorative, visible. I used induction coils to amplify the ascent. She didn't understand the calculations." Holmes smiled faintly. "On the contrary, she understood too well the audience's eye. A rising column of blood. It was a perfect performance for a mind weary of invisible success." Ward closed her eyes. "I wanted them to see that beauty could be born of science." And instead, said Holmes softly, they will see that guilt is the same color as discovery. He motioned Gregson aside and crouched again by the vent. The pulse was slower now, fading. He adjusted the lamp's wick until only a narrow flame remained. Observe, he said quietly. The beat lessens, but note how each contraction corresponds to a faint spark within the coil. There, a sequence. It may be communicating a pattern, perhaps unintentionally. A pattern? I asked. Holmes's tone deepened. A record, Watson. Machines remember by repetition. Each pulse is a trace of the moment it began, its genesis encoded in rhythm. Ward whispered, You cannot read it. Perhaps not, but I can predict its silence. He held his watch to the vent, counting. 5 beats remain. 4. 3. At 2, the rhythm faltered. At 1, it ceased. A long breath seemed to pass through the room. The red shimmer dulled, the fluid within the tube settling into stillness. Holmes exhaled softly. So ends the rebellion of blood. Gregson crossed, himself. Good riddance. Yet even as he spoke, a faint tick sounded again, this time from the opposite wall. Holmes turned swiftly. Ah, the echo. No, sir, said Gregson uneasily. That came from outside. Holmes's gaze sharpened. Then our illusion seeks new air. He strode to the door, throwing it open. The corridor beyond was dim, but in the distance I saw a faint red reflection crawling along the wall, as if a thread of light were dragging itself toward the exit. The current, Holmes breathed. It has transferred along the secondary wiring. It means to escape its confinement. Can it? I asked. Not of itself, but of someone who aids it, someone who still believes. Our eyes turned instinctively to Dr. Ward. She had slipped free of the constable's grasp and now stood at the far end of the corridor, her silhouette bathed in that same crimson glow. Holmes's voice rang out. "Doctor, do not touch that wire!" She turned slowly, her face illuminated from below by the ghostly red. "I must," she said quietly. "It's calling me." Holmes took a step forward. "Then, madam, let it call, but do not answer." The light flared once, painting her shadow across the wall. The tick, tick, tick resumed. Slow, heavy, deliberate. Holmes's jaw tightened. "Watson, she means to restart it from the main line." The inspector shouted for his men, but the air had already begun to tremble again, the vent grating vibrating under our feet. Holmes drew a long breath. The heart has found its second wind. Holmes was already in motion before the second tremor had run its length through the floor. "Watson, cut the corridor lights. She draws her strength from vision. Deprive her of it." I threw the switch. The lamps went black one by one, leaving only the scarlet thread that crept along the wall like a living vein. It pulsed faster now, its rhythm steady as a heartbeat. Tick, 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 each beat mirrored by a dull glow beneath the tiles. "Keep back," Holmes shouted. "The conduit is charged." Dr. Ward stood motionless at the far end, eyes fixed on the light that coiled around her hand. "It knows me," she whispered. "It wants completion." "Completion," Holmes repeated grimly, is death wearing logic's mask. He advanced slowly, his voice deliberate, coaxing. "You built a field to imitate life, not to exchange it. Step away, and you will break the circuit." She shook her head. "You don't understand. If I release it, it will die again. It needs direction. Thought keeps it moving." "Then think of mercy," Holmes said softly. "For yourself and for the truth." The tick, tick, tick grew louder, echoing in the metal vents above us. The sound no longer climbed. It circled, enclosing the corridor in a pulse that felt almost human. Gregson and his men had halted midway, uncertain whether to approach or flee. Holmes gestured them back. "No, bullets, Inspector. One spark could finish us all." He moved nearer to Ward. his voice lowering to a near whisper. "Listen to me, Doctor. The current has no mind. The pulse you hear is the echo of your own. It climbs because you wish to rise above guilt. Let it stop, and you will live." For a moment her hand faltered, hovering above the glowing wire. The light flickered, dimmed, then flared again as she cried out, "You're wrong. It hears me." Holmes's expression hardened. "Watson, note the floor. The vibration transfers to the baseboards, not her hand. The current moves outward. She's no longer its conductor. It uses her as beacon." A deep hum rolled through the corridor, shaking dust from the ceiling. The red light shot upward along the wall, branching like veins toward the roof. Holmes seized my arm. "She's reversing polarity again, pulling power from the entire circuit. If she completes the loop, the field will ignite every metallic surface in this building." "What must we do?" I gasped. "Isolate the source." He pointed to a junction box near the stairwell. "The relay wire. Cut it." I ran toward it, knife in hand. The hum grew louder, the tick faster, until it merged into a continuous vibration that set my teeth on edge. As I reached the box, a bolt of red light leapt across the wall, striking the handle beside my head. The smell of ozone burned my throat. "Watson!" Holmes's voice cut through the din. "Wait for my signal." He turned back to Ward, who now trembled violently, her hand rigid upon the wire. "Look at me," he commanded. "If the machine still obeys thought, then command it to stop. You alone can silence it." Her eyes met his, wild and frightened. "I can't," she said. "It's stronger than I am." Holmes stepped closer, his face calm though the air quivered with danger. "No, Doctor. It is only as strong as your fear. You gave it life through will. Take it back through reason. Imagine the silence. Hear it ending." She closed her eyes. The glow around her hand began to fade. For a single, breathless second, the hum softened, then a sharp metallic crack split the air. Holmes shouted, "Now, Watson! Cut it!" I slashed the main line. A burst of blue fire cascaded along the corridor like lightning trapped in glass. The red light shattered into fragments that hung a moment before dying. The silence that followed was so profound that I could hear the fall of dust from the rafters. Then came one solitary tick, slow, final, fading into stillness. Holmes lowered his arm. "It is done." Ward collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "You've killed it." Holmes knelt beside her, his voice quiet. "No, Doctor. You have allowed it to rest." Gregson exhaled with relief. "I thought we were done for. Shall I have the place cleared?" "Presently," said Holmes. "But first, one truth remains." He turned to Vale, who had crept forward, pale and shaking. "Mr. Vale, you claim innocence in this. Yet the auxiliary circuit bore your design. Only you could have engineered the extension that allowed Dr. Ward's signal to propagate." Vale swallowed hard. I never meant harm. She said it was for observation only." Holmes's tone sharpened. "And yet you ran when it turned violent. Why?" "Because I realized it wasn't observation. It was control. She wanted to use the current to command living tissue. She said thought could direct blood flow, even stop the heart. I couldn't be part of it." Ward looked up, stricken. "You misunderstand. It was theory, pure theory." Holmes regarded her with sad gravity. "And yet you bled a man to prove it. Professor Marbury's rival Latham died to make your theory visible. Science became vanity's accomplice." She buried her face in her hands. "I never meant to kill him. He came to mock me. He pulled the lever before I could stop him." Gregson stepped forward. "Then his death was accident?" Holmes shook his head slowly. "Accident seldom writes its own telegrams, Inspector. Someone ensured I would hear of blood that rose against gravity. It was an invitation." "By whom?" I asked. "By the one who needed an audience." He looked down at Ward. "You summoned me to prove you right, even in your guilt. The mind's final refuge is the approval of the man who disproves it. She gave a broken laugh. Perhaps I did. You'll make sense of it, won't you? You always do. I make order, Doctor, Holmes said softly. Not sense. The latter belongs to God. She did not reply. Gregson's men led her away, the clink of their boots echoing like the dying pulse of the machine. Holmes remained standing, staring at the vent. Curious, he murmured. The sound ceased, yet the dust upon the grill still trembles. I followed his gaze. A faint quiver moved across the metal surface, almost imperceptible. But there. Residual vibration, I asked. Perhaps, he said. Or perhaps thought does travel further than we care to measure. He drew a long breath. Come, Watson. The night has grown late and the air in this place grows unhealthy. As we turned to leave, the vent behind us gave one last, barely audible tick. Holmes stopped, listening. His eyes darkened with something between curiosity and unease. The pulse, he said softly, has not quite bled itself out. Holmes did not move. His face, half illumined by the flickering lamplight, bore that same intense concentration I had seen only when his mind stood on the precipice between reason and fear. Watson, he said quietly, that was no echo. The current lives again. The faint tremor along the vent quickened. Tick, 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 a ghostly heartbeat resuming after death. Gregson's men froze, their boots grinding softly against the tiles. Impossible, muttered the inspector. The main line's cut. Then it draws, from a secondary source, Holmes replied. Dr. Ward may have fashioned more than one relay. He crouched beside the grill, listening, his hand held mere inches above the vibrating surface. Feel this, Watson. The rhythm is steadier than before, more deliberate. Someone or something feeds it anew. I touched the vent. The metal throbbed faintly under my palm, not with the randomness of cooling pipes, but with the measured cadence of an organism. It can't be, I whispered. There's no power left. Power is merely stored intention, said Holmes, and intention, it seems, lingers. Dr. Ward, still under guard but watching intently, gave a hollow laugh. You see? It knows I'm here. It will not die while I live. Holmes's eyes flicked to her, sharp and surgical. Then perhaps it feeds not on current, but on consciousness. She met his gaze defiantly. You think me mad, Mr. Holmes. Yet you feel it too, that pulse, that will. Tell me truly, can you deny it lives? Holmes straightened. I can deny only what I understand. This, doctor, remains uncertain, which is precisely why I must end it. He turned to Gregson. Have all conduits traced from this point to their origin? Every pipe, every junction. One line remains hidden. Gregson barked orders, his men dispersing. The air grew heavy again, each tick vibrating like the toll of a small unseen bell. Holmes remained crouched, eyes narrowed. Watson, hand me the glass sphere we took from the storage room. I fetched it. The interior residue glowed faintly crimson, though no energy remained to charge it. Holmes held it near the vent. At once, the light within stirred, thin threads of vapor rising, twisting toward the grill. You see, he murmured, residual magnetism. The field recognizes its parent. I felt a chill. Then what are we facing, Holmes? An echo of mind imprinted on mechanism. The living remnant of thought trapped in material form? It is not supernatural. It is memory. He placed the sphere gently upon the vent. The tick deepened into a slow thrum, the vibration spreading through the floor. Holmes, I warned, you're feeding it. Precisely. To see what it hungers for. Dr. Ward's voice rose suddenly. Stop, you'll awaken it fully. Better to awaken it under my observation, he said coolly, than under your delusion. The vent emitted a low, resonant hum. The lamp flame quivered and bent inward, as if the air itself inhaled. Gregson reappeared, panting. "We've traced the last conduit, sir. It runs under the courtyard, toward the hospital morgue." Holmes's head snapped up. The morgue, of course. The field sought a reservoir of still blood. He snatched his coat. "Watson, with me. Gregson, post 2 men here to ensure no one tampers with the apparatus." Ward struggled against the constable. "Don't go down there. It's drawn to what doesn't resist. It will use you." Holmes's voice was almost kind. "Then it shall find me most unappetizing." We crossed the corridor at a near run, the echo of our steps merging with that ceaseless tick, tick, tick that now seemed to come from every wall. The morgue door stood ajar, its iron hinges cold beneath my hand. Inside, the lamps burned low. Rows of covered forms lay in silence, the linen edges fluttering faintly as though stirred by breath. The sound was louder here, a constant vibration in the air, deep and rhythmic, a parody of life. Holmes bent over the nearest slab. "Observe, Watson. See the slight tremor along the fabric? Each body hums to the same pulse. The field runs through them like current through wire." I recoiled. "Good God!" He pointed to a set of copper filaments strung along the ceiling, almost invisible in the dim light. "There lies the last circuit, an underfloor line connecting each table to the vent above. Dr. Ward's machine has found its echo chamber." Holmes took the knife from my pocket and carefully severed the nearest filament. The hum dipped, then steadied again. "Self-correcting," he said. "It reroutes instantly. Ingenious." "Then we can't stop it?" "Oh, we can, but we must speak to it in its own language." He drew a chalk stick from his coat and began marking quick symbols along the tile floor, lines intersecting in geometric precision. "The field responds to polarity and resonance. We shall counter it with rhythm." "Rhythm?" I echoed. "Yes. Every machine sings, Watson, even those built to bleed." He tapped the floor thrice with his cane. Tick, tick, tick. The vent answered with its slower pulse. He tapped again, shifting the interval. The vibration hesitated, uncertain, then slowed to match his tempo. "You see?" he said. "It listens." I could scarcely breathe. "You're conversing with it?" "Not conversation. Coaxing. It believes itself the heartbeat of this place. We shall persuade it to rest." He continued, cane rising and falling in that measured counter-rhythm, his face intent. The hum wavered, softened, then began to fade. One by one, the shrouded forms upon the slabs grew still. When the final tick died, the silence that followed was pure, absolute. Holmes straightened, the chalk dust smudged on his sleeve. "There, the current sleeps." I exhaled in relief. "You've done it." He gave a weary nod. "Perhaps. But remember, every echo waits for an answer." From the far corner of the morgue came a faint creak, then a single, deliberate tick. Holmes turned, his eyes dark with comprehension. "Unless," he said softly, "someone answers first." Holmes was already striding toward the sound before its echo had died. The single tick was followed by another, faint but deliberate, as if answering his challenge. "You hear it, Watson. It has chosen its new mouthpiece." The noise came from beneath one of the far slabs. Holmes bent, resting, his ear against the cold stone. "Here," he whispered, "a resonance chamber. Lift the cover carefully, no sudden force." We moved together. The slab gave a reluctant groan and a faint red light seeped through the gap. Beneath lay a cavity lined with copper wire, and at its center, a glass cylinder no larger than a man's forearm, filled with the same crimson fluid we had seen before. Within it pulsed a steady glow, brightening and fading in time with the tick, tick, tick. Holmes's expression darkened. "The true core. The blood was never meant to rise. It was meant to remember." I stared. "You mean this thing has consciousness?" "Not consciousness," he said, "but repetition. the reflection of thought trapped in chemical form. Dr. Ward attempted to fuse mind and matter. Here the experiment succeeded beyond her control. He reached inside the cavity, fingers steady despite the vibration that traveled through the air like breath. Observe the rhythmic surge, Watson. The pulse corresponds exactly to a human heartbeat. 80 beats per minute, Ward's own. I felt a chill. Then it carries her imprint. Precisely. And that is why it revived when she was near. The mind's echo seeks its source, like iron to lodestone. Gregson entered behind us, his voice hushed. Is it dangerous? Holmes did not look up. It is unfinished, and unfinished things crave completion. He lifted the cylinder, the red light spilling across his hands. The pulse quickened as if aware of being touched. You feel that, Watson? It knows. I swallowed hard. What will you do? End the feedback. To silence thought, one must still its reflection. Dr. Ward, who had followed under guard, gave a sudden cry. Don't touch it. If you break the seal, it will discharge everything it holds. Holmes turned to her, his tone almost gentle. Then tell me how to stop it without violence. She shook her head, trembling. You can't. It is my pulse, my pattern. It will die only when I do. Or when you release it, Holmes countered. Surrender your belief in it. The field cannot exist without conviction. Her eyes glistened. You ask me to deny the one thing that made me more than forgotten. I ask you, he said softly, to be remembered for truth, not for delusion. For a long moment she wavered. The red glow brightened as though listening to her hesitation. Then she closed her eyes and whispered, Stop. The light dimmed, but did not vanish. Holmes exhaled. Not enough. Her words lack conviction. The bond persists. He looked to me. Watson, do you recall the sphere's behavior when near the vent? The field mirrors emotion. Therefore, we require inversion, not denial, but calm. I nodded. Then she must think not of loss, but of peace. Holmes smiled faintly. Exactly so. Doctor, breathe evenly. Picture still water, not rising blood. Ward obeyed, trembling. The pulse slowed. Holmes lowered the cylinder gently back into its cavity. Good. Continue. The current follows you downward. The tick, tick, tick faded to a faint murmur, like a memory receding through corridors. For a moment, silence reclaimed the morgue. Then, without warning, the glow flared violently, bathing the walls in crimson. Holmes stepped back. Too soon. The pattern rejects passivity. It requires balance. I seized his arm. Balance? Yes. Reason against passion. 2 pulses, not 1. He turned to me suddenly. Watson, your hand. Place it here, opposite hers. What good will that do? You represent observation. Her mirror in rational form. If her thought cannot rest alone, yours may steady it. I did as he said, laying my palm on the glass beside hers. The heat beneath was uncanny, alive, trembling between us like a living thing. The red light oscillated faster, then steadied, 2 rhythms overlapping. Hers frantic, mine firm. Holmes leaned close, whispering as though to the air. Now listen, machine. You have fed on confusion long enough. Order commands you. Stop. The sound faltered. The vibration weakened until it was barely perceptible. The light within the cylinder shimmered once, then dulled to a faint ember. Holmes withdrew his hand, eyes intent. Watson, let go, slowly. I lifted my palm. The glow flickered, held, and went out. The silence was absolute. Dr. Ward sagged, tears streaking her face. It's gone, she whispered. Holmes studied her for a long moment. Not gone, Doctor. Released. You have done what reason alone could not. Gregson crossed himself. And good riddance to it. I'll see the thing locked away. Holmes placed a hand on the inspector's arm. No, my dear Gregson. Destroying it would only scatter its fragments into the world. It must be buried, sealed beneath the weight of earth, where no thought can reach it. Buried where? In the hospital courtyard, Holmes replied. The ground already remembers blood. One more secret will not offend it. Ward's voice was small. And me, Mr. Holmes? He looked at her gravely. The law will determine your fate. But your conscience, I think, has begun its sentence already. She nodded faintly and allowed herself to be led away. Holmes turned back to me. You perceive, Watson, that belief can animate machinery as surely as electricity. The human mind is the oldest conductor of all. I managed a tired smile. You mean to say we've arrested an emotion? Perhaps only silenced it, he answered. Emotions, like currents, leave residue. They hum in the dark until someone listens. As we stepped toward the door, the lantern flickered. For an instant, the faintest tick echoed behind us, so slight it might have been imagination. Holmes paused, his eyes meeting mine. The pulse of memory, Watson, he said softly. Even gravity cannot drag it down, forever. The sound faded into stillness, yet I could not shake the sense that somewhere in the depth beneath St. Bartholomew's, a quiet rhythm waited for breath. We left the morgue as dawn began its cautious climb over the eastern roofs of St. Bartholomew's. The sky, faintly pink beyond the frost-glazed panes, seemed innocent of all that had occurred beneath it. Holmes moved without haste through the corridor, his face expressionless save for the minute tightening at the corners of his eyes, the look he wore when the mind, having labored long, finally relinquished its hold upon the problem it has mastered. Behind us, the constables bore the sealed cylinder toward the courtyard. It pulsed once, faintly against the canvas that wrapped it, one small tick, and then was still. Strange, murmured Gregson, glancing over his shoulder, that a bit of glass and metal could set the whole building shaking. Holmes gave a small nod. Not strange, Inspector, inevitable. Give an idea enough faith and it will rattle empires. I caught the weary amusement in his tone. Then this case, Holmes, was not murder alone, but theology. He smiled slightly. In a sense. We have seen a new religion born and buried within a single night. Its deity was motion, its creed defiance, and its priestess, an intellect untempered by humility. Gregson exhaled, eager to be done. And the young fellow, Vale, what of him? Release him once his statement is signed, Holmes replied. He built a snare without knowing its prey. Fear is punishment enough for one so impressionable. The inspector nodded and left us to the quiet of the stairwell. Holmes paused at a window overlooking the square below. The city, still wrapped in early fog, stirred to its morning pulse. Carts clattering, bells faint through the mist. Yet in that moment, I thought even London's vast machinery moved with gentler rhythm, as though aware that one unnatural heart had been stopped. Holmes watched the constables dig the pit where the cylinder would be buried. Earth is the great conductor, Watson, he said softly. It absorbs all frequencies in the end. I studied his profile in the half-light. And what of the mind that created it? He turned to me. It too will find equilibrium. Madness and genius differ only in resistance to gravity. Dr. Ward's mind simply rose too high until reason could no longer hold it. We stood in silence a while, listening to the muffled scrape of spades below. When the work was done and the earth packed down again, Holmes turned away from the window. Come, my dear fellow. Mrs. Hudson's coffee will restore our faith in natural law. I followed him out to the waiting cab. The driver stared curiously at the two of us. Mud-streaked, smoke-scented, eyes hollow with fatigue, but asked no question. London, after all, had long since learned not to ask questions of Sherlock Holmes. As the cab rolled westward, the rhythm of the wheels upon the stones struck faintly familiar in my ear. Tick, tick, tick. I looked up, startled. Holmes smiled. "The world repeats itself," he said. "Even sound conspires to remind us of the case we leave behind. Yet repetition is not resurrection. The pulse of that machine will not outlast this morning's frost." "And if it does?" I asked. "Then it will find no host. Dr. Ward's faith has bled out. The pattern will fade, as all delusions do when deprived of audience." His gaze drifted to the street lamps passing by. "Still," he added more quietly, "I confess it was beautifully conceived. A mechanism designed to imitate vitality, yet wholly dependent on belief. There lies the perfect metaphor for human invention." "You speak almost admiringly." "I admire precision, not consequence," he answered. "Her tragedy was not that she disobeyed science, but that she trusted it to absolve her. One cannot make morality rise against gravity." The cab rattled on. I found myself watching his reflection in the glass, the sharp line of the nose, the thoughtful mouth. "You were unusually gentle with her at the end," I said. "Pity is not often among your instruments." Holmes's expression softened. "There are moments, Watson, when a mind is so fractured that analysis becomes cruelty. To demonstrate logic to the deranged is to hand a map to a drowning man." He drew his coat tighter. "Besides, her punishment was not mine to deliver. Nature possesses her own form of justice, quiet, inevitable, and far more exacting than the courts." For a time, neither of us spoke. The city's noise began to thicken with the hour. Hawkers calling, hooves clattering, the bell of St. Dunstan's marking 8. Against that living sound, the faint mechanical rhythm of our cab seemed almost fragile. Holmes leaned back. "You note how swiftly London forgets, Watson. Even now the world resumes its pulse, indifferent to what was almost born beneath it. There is comfort in that." "Perhaps," I said, "or perhaps it is warning. We bury our monsters, yet their echoes return in every wheel and wire we create." He regarded me with a half-smile. "Ah, my dear fellow, you grow philosophical. That is always a sign the case has concluded." I laughed softly. "And you, Holmes, do you never reflect?" "I reflect constantly," he replied. "I simply refuse to sentimentalize reflection." The cab turned onto Baker Street. The morning light had grown clear and steady, stripping the fog from the rooftops. Holmes stepped out first, pausing to glance upward at our familiar window. How curiously ordinary it looks, does it not? As though reason itself dwelt there, untroubled. Inside, Mrs. Hudson met us with her habitual concern. "You've been out all night again, Mr. Holmes. Tea or coffee?" "Coffee, my good lady," and perhaps a moment of silence. She nodded and vanished. Holmes removed his coat and settled into his chair, the firelight catching the tired gleam in his eyes. I took my place opposite, journal in hand, though for once I found no words ready. He lit his pipe, drawing slowly. "There, Watson. Hear it." I frowned. "Only the crackle of the fire." He smiled faintly. "Precisely. The proper music of an ordered universe." We sat thus for several minutes, the smoke curling upward in blue threads. At length I said, "You think the phenomenon truly ended then? No recurrence? No surviving current?" Holmes exhaled a thin stream of smoke. "Nothing rises forever, Watson. The universe insists on balance. Even blood that defied gravity must eventually fall." His gaze drifted toward the window. Outside, a milk cart passed, its wheels beating the stones with rhythmic precision. Tick, tick, tick. Holmes' eyes half closed, listening. "There is your answer," he murmured. "Not a phantom pulse, but the reminder that life continues by repetition, not rebellion." I looked out after the cart, the sound fading into distance, and I thought how often in our adventures I had witnessed that delicate poise between wonder and dread, between the strange and the human. We pursue mysteries, I reflected, not to escape reason, but to renew faith in it, lest the world's quieter miracles go unnoticed. When I turned back, Holmes was already deep in thought, the firelight glinting upon the curve of his cheek. "You are writing again," he said without opening his eyes. "Perhaps," I answered, "though I doubt any reader will believe this one." "They seldom do," he murmured. "Fortunately, belief is no longer required." The mantel clock struck the half-hour, steady and unhurried. Its ticking filled the silence between us. Measured, earthly, unthreatening. Holmes smiled faintly, as if hearing some echo far below. "Ah, Watson," he said, "listen, how pleasantly gravity reasserts itself." The clock answered with one final, perfect tick.